All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. Hope you had a nice break. I realize that hour, at least for me, went by very quickly, and probably because there's lots of things that, that I have on my plate to do, as many of you do as well. But welcome back for our last, but not least important. It is one of our important sessions of today. We've been hearing lots of great stuff up until now, and so I don't anticipate that it won't be boring, and I anticipate that it will be great. So we'll be editing on an exciting note, talking with Shannon and Maria Christina about coordinated community response, which is the foundation of all of the campus work. So all the things you've heard today, all of the things you've heard intersect with a coordinated community response and are part of a coordinated community response. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to Shannon and Maria Christina to introduce themselves and to begin our session for this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Lottie. This is Shannon speaking. My name is Shannon Collins. I use she, her pronouns. I am the director of the campus program at the National Organization for Victim Assistance, and I am very pleased to be here today with my colleague, Maria Cristina. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. This is Maria Cristina speaking. I also work with Shannon at the National Organization for Victim Assistance, and I am very excited to be seeing some good people that we worked together in the past that are present in this afternoon. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much, Maria Cristina. We are so pleased to be your technical assistance provider for coordinated community response. We want to welcome you to your final session of day 2 and thank you for returning and for being present for this next hour that we have together. It's really a full circle moment for me. My first full-time professional campus position was as a project director for the very first cohort of OVW campus program grantees in '99. And it's just always so lovely to come back to do grantee orientation and feel that full circle moment. Could you advance the slide? So we know it's the end of the day. And so we would like to invite you to use Menti, and you can hold your phone or any device that you might have that's portable right up to the screen. Or I will post a link also in the chat that you can click on. And that will take you to Menti, and we'll be using that throughout this session to engage you and to hear a little bit of feedback from you as well. On most of the slide pages, there are reaction buttons, so you can like it, you can dislike it, you can add a question mark if you have a question about it, or you can cat it just for fun. So on the next slide, if you move it forward, we'll start practicing with the reaction. So if you all could give me a reaction so I know that you're connected. Okay, thank you. Welcome, welcome. So we're not only welcoming you to this session, we're welcoming you to this community. So this community of diverse institutions of higher education that are collectively working together to end domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, which we'll start calling DVSAS for short. The campus program is unlike any other grant program, I'm guessing, that you've participated in that we are truly developing a culture of support for one another through the wonderful technical assistance team that you've met today and you'll continue to meet tomorrow, through the really committed support of OVW and through your peer institutions that are in this grantee orientation with you, and that you will meet over the course of this program. And one of the beautiful aspects of this work is the emphasis on collective leadership and coordinated community response. We can release the expectation that we need to bear the burden of this work alone. And we know the context of campus work and how siloed it can get, and how isolating it can be for certain folks like campus advocates and people trying to do this work. And so bringing this collective approach is really comforting, and we hope that you appreciate it as much as we do. So we want to open up a few poll questions just to get to know who's in the space, and also we'll be practicing using Menti. So if we could move to the next poll. So we'd love to know your program status. So are you brand new grantees, or are you new staff in an existing award? And we'll give folks just a few more moments to respond. And Kristen's noting in the chat that they love Mentimeter and use it with students. I do highly recommend it. It's a really nice engagement feature. All right, thank you. So it looks like the majority of folks in this space are brand new grantees, so welcome to you. And if you're new staff on an existing award, welcome to you as well. And then we can move on to the next question, which is, what is your professional role on campus? And for those of you saying other, maybe you can let us know in the chat what your role is on campus. All right, it looks like the responses are slowing down, and the majority of us we have project coordinators or directors in the space, as well as project supervisors. It's wonderful to see both roles represented. We have a few sponsored program staff and some other roles as well. And Becky is in the chat saying they're a senior executive assistant and taking on that programmatic role until hiring. So welcome and thank you for doing this. The more folks we can get involved and connected to the information, the better onboarding process we'll have for the project directors when they join us. So thank you for that. And we have one more question for you, and that is, do you have a functioning CCRT on campus? And there is a key word, which is functioning. So some of you already do, some of you don't, and some of you are saying, what is a CCRT? And I'll tell you what that stands for: Coordinated Community Response Team, and it is one of the foundational aspects of this campus program. And Megan in the chat says, I need more options. I thought about that. And please feel free to give us feedback, ask questions in the chat as we go along, and we will monitor that as we go. So, and for the person who said, what is a CCRT? We will define it shortly. But it looks like we're about half and half in terms of folks who already have a CCRT and folks who don't have one yet. And so we'll definitely address both of those contexts as we go as well. So thank you for providing us a little bit more context for who's in the space and how we might direct our comments. These are our objectives for the day, and our goal today is really to introduce you to the coordinated community response approach and help you get started. There is far more information and support that we can and we will provide over the course of your grant award. And we acknowledge that we will not be able to address it all today. We will move at the pace of humanity and provide you with some foundational ideas and strategies and concrete next steps to help you get started with either building or rebuilding or re-energizing your existing CCRT. And so in the time that we have together today, we'll explore a collective approach to addressing campus DV/SAS, that is domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. We will define coordinated community response, including the purpose and composition of the team and that collective impact approach that we infuse throughout this work. And then finally, we'll just consider first steps to building or rebuilding your coordinated community response on campus. So I will turn it over to Maria Cristina to let us get started.
Thank you, Shannon. This is Maria Cristina speaking. Collective impact, like Shannon said, is the approach that we use to create and inform the coordinated community response on campus to address dating violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking, or DVSAS. And because DVSAS is a problem that impacts all the campus community, we strongly believe that the community needs to be involved when addressing these crimes on campus. Therefore, the main overarching goal of the campus program is to provide a systemic, inclusive, trauma-informed, and a coordinated approach to preventing and responding to the DVSAS on campus in ways that are sustainable and that result in long-term institutional transformation and shift in social norms and cultural norms around DVSAS. So the coordinated community response team is a diverse team. It is a multidisciplinary group that commits to a community aspiration or a common agenda to advance equity by learning together, aligning, and integrating your actions to achieve population and systems change. So the collective impact approach is an approach that has worked in a wide range of social issues. And we've also seen the progress in the campuses that are starting to use this approach. So when we work together with diverse people, we all bring different values, different experiences, different lenses and approaches that shape that collective work. So when we think about equity, we mean that common understanding that we do not all start from the same place and that we need to acknowledge and make adjustments to those imbalances. Working together towards equity requires the team to identify and overcome intentional and unintentional barriers that may arise from biases or the systems that are currently in place in the institution and in the community where it's grounded. We also welcome strategic learning and how we build the team's capacity to understand the complexities of interacting with the four crimes, DVSAS, and also considering the range variety of disciplines within the team and how we can align and integrate our actions, the progress that we have, and strategies in similar ways that allow for the team to grow together and improve and bring the work to a next step and another level. So all these actions have the goal of achieving long-term results in terms of community engagement, and also building and establishing meaningful relationships with all the members that will be part of that process of changing the campus culture around domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking on campus. So how we do this? Like Shannon said earlier, this is just an overview, and we will spend more time in different technical assistance strategies that we use to go over this together. So in the first training and technical institutes, we will spend more time unpacking and thinking through what the collective impact approach is, and hopefully that will help to share the information with other team members of your institution. But for today, we do want to highlight 5 strategies for centering equity in the collective work, as these represent 2 of our most important values in the coordinated community response approach. The first one is being collective. It is a collective approach. None of us can or should do this work alone. And we work with a fabulous trainer who's a former grantee, Naima Tokuno, and she says that the CCR team is a team sport. The second value we want to elevate today is that in all of our collective work, we do center equity. And that means that we center survivors, and that means all the survivors. And we could mention a few, just like LGBTQI+ survivors, students of color, students with disabilities, male survivors. And note that this is not a comprehensive list, and that you need to work with your coordinated community response to define and identify what's your campus composition and who are your survivors, how to better describe your students and their identities. So that's very important, because we need to center equity if we are to serve all the survivors on campus and not just a few of them. So we will share information and strategies to support the coordinated community response team with community engagement, how to establish processes and structure guidelines that can help advance the collective work. That includes communication skills, facilitation skills, trauma-informed approaches, how to address power dynamics, and how to build that collective and equity leadership, and also the accountability process to advance the work. So now I'll pass it back to Shannon, who will get us started in where to begin.
Thank you, Maria Cristina. This is Shannon speaking, and that's a lot of big thinking. That's a lot to think about, and sometimes we get a lot of head nods like yes, we agree with that. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was really articulate, where do we even begin in creating this coordinated community response? And the first step is to assemble and establish a coordinated community response team. And that team needs to reflect your campus context, meet regularly, and be committed to the goals of the project. So let's think about that a little bit more. When we think about a CCR, the first step really is in bringing the right folks to the table to help you plan. And often campuses will bring a core team of prevention and response personnel to the table at the beginning, which is a solid strategy, and really focus on keeping it small to keep it manageable. And that does make sense. And campuses will often have the intention of bringing other who they see as adjacent folks into the process later. One thing that I just want to name about that is often the other folks are also other folks, right? We're talking about students, representatives from historically marginalized communities, survivors, and other just critical stakeholders on your campus who really need to be invited into the process early to co-create with you. So if we're really going to develop this collective leadership approach, we really need to spend some critical thinking time on who are the right people to be at the table from the very beginning. And we will talk a little bit more about composition in a few minutes. The second aspect is a team that meets regularly. And you know, this is an approach built around the development of authentic relationships, and the purpose of the CCRT is to bring folks together. And a question we get often is, what does regularly meet mean? Does it mean weekly? Does it mean monthly? Does it mean annually? And you know, there's not a specified minimum amount of time of what meet regularly means. You will make that decision based on your campus context, your campus size, the size of your team. Some campuses meet more often in that first planning year, and then change the meeting structure once they transition into implementation. So some small campuses have reported meeting once a week or once every other week. Others report meeting once a month. So you determine that schedule, but bringing folks together is a critical part of developing this CCRT. And then, of course, the third aspect is developing a team that's committed to the goals of the project. And we'll definitely spend some time thinking about engagement strategies for your team. And, you know, we acknowledge that some members will be there because they're passionate and they want to be there. Others will be there because their role requires it. And it's really beautiful when that Venn diagram overlaps, when the people whose role requires them to be there are also the folks who are really passionate about it. But one of the things to really think about is the CCR team is the container for carrying out the collective CCR approach. And the role of the facilitators and the project directors is really to help build that container and engage team members to find and name and cultivate that shared commitment. So we want to just pause here. And, you know, it's funny that we waited a little while to say what the definition of the team is, because we really wanted to talk about those foundational ideas of collective work before we get into the weeds of what a coordinated community response team is and what it isn't. So a coordinated community response team is defined as a multidisciplinary team of campus and community partners that meet regularly to assess, plan, monitor, and evaluate campus prevention and response efforts. This team facilitates communication between key campus departments and community partners, ensures messages are consistent and reinforced across programs and the institution, and ensures that the institutional response to victims is seamless, consistent, supportive, and trauma-informed. In other words, it's really high-level systems thinking. And I think it's important to name what a CCRT is not, because in campuses, we have a lot of different kinds of multidisciplinary teams, and the CCR team is not a response team. This team does not discuss individual cases on campus. It serves as a working group that focuses on building that coordinated, collaborative, and systemic response on campus. And so, you know, many campuses have behavioral intervention teams, sexual assault or domestic violence response teams. And while it makes sense to have these teams in place, their purpose is distinct from CCRTs, and they don't fulfill the same need, and they don't focus on the same things as the CCR team does. So one of the technical assistance supports we can provide is if you work on a campus that has existing multidisciplinary teams that address this issue, that we can help you establish linkages and really clarify how different teams might work together without duplicating efforts, and also acknowledging kind of how much time folks have to participate in any particular multidisciplinary team. So if you all have questions about that, please just put them in the chat and we can clarify any of that. So I do see a question that I'll address from Elizabeth in the chat. I have heard the R stand for review and for response. As I'm drafting the charge statement for our CCRT, does OVW care, or do you recommend that it stand for one or the other? So we use the term coordinated community response team. I have not heard review team as a word for that, but what that brings up for me is a case review team. And so that is definitely distinct. So sometimes campus CCRTs do review cases, but that's cases that have happened many years ago, where they're completely de-identified. Oh, thank you, Sally. So Sally is clarifying that this is terminology used in the University of California system. So one thing that I will say is that you don't have to, you can call your CCRT what you will. You don't have to call it our CCRT. So many campus teams actually develop campus-specific names for their teams, like, you know, Kansas Cares or something like that. Thank you, Lottie, for waiting. Lottie's waiting in on the chat as well about the review teams. And so you do have some flexibility in what you call your team, but this team will do more than simply review cases. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. So, you know, this program is not only about meeting minimum requirements, but there are some minimum requirements that your team should be aware of and that we'll highlight here. The statutory minimum requirement for CCR includes the creation of a CCR team that includes both internal and external partners. And we wanted to highlight that because sometimes campuses are reluctant to bring external partners into their campus work. And this is a minimum requirement as well as a best practice. You know, campuses are situated in the larger community in which they're located. And of course, we know that students, faculty, and staff are moving between campus and in the community. So bringing in not only community partners for response, but for expertise that we might not have on campus is really critical. The second requirement is that internal partners must include the president's office, student affairs, CLARI staff, and CSAs, which stands for Campus Security Authorities, campus-based victim service providers, if you have them, campus law enforcement, housing or residence life, and disciplinary staff. These, of course, are minimum requirements of who serves on a CCRT, but you are certainly not limited to these partners. And then, of course, external partners must include at least one criminal justice system partner and at least one victim service provider within the community, and you're not limited to these. Everyone who created a proposal for this has already put in external and internal memorandum of understanding into place. So you have identified those minimum partners as part of your proposal. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice, so I'm trying hard to project. So there's another question in the chat from Jennifer. I still get confused why it's called a response team if it also engages with prevention. I think that's a great question because especially in the past 5 years, we've really been thinking about separating response and prevention. When I think about response in the context of a CCRT, I'm thinking about an institutional level response. And so that to me means when the institution, how the institution approaches these issues and how the institution is creating trauma-informed response, policy, prevention efforts, and the whole way that the university engages in this issue. And so Lottie's adding that, you know, that she thinks of it as system strategies. And so that's a better way of saying what I'm trying to say, right? That it's higher level systems response. But I think that's a great question. I'm gonna answer this one more question before we move on. And Jessica's asking, can you add external community partners to the MOU after the fact? Wanting to include culturally specific advocacy agencies to our team? Yes, absolutely. And I love that you're already thinking about doing that. You can always revise and update your memorandum of understanding. And as you get into planning and implementation, many of you will find you need to do exactly that. You probably had a really good plan of what you wanted to do. You obviously wrote a really great proposal that got funded. And now OVW is saying, stop, think again, really assess the needs of your campus, bring all these stakeholders to the table, and engage in a planning year where, you know, your priorities might change a little bit. And so similar to that, you might identify new partners that you need to bring in, and you may even need to revise your memorandums of understanding. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about partners, and I will pass it back over to Maria Cristina.
Thank you, Shannon. This is Maria Cristina. And as Shannon started to describe, here we have a list of potential partners to consider. And it is very important to always think big, you know, try to see a larger picture, the broader impact. This is not an exhaustive list, and we'll go through this with you again in the Training and Technical Institute, the TTI, when it comes. But this does list a couple of representatives from your campus and your campus community that you might consider. And like the question that was asked, you can always consider growing your team, because that's precisely the reasoning behind that coordinated community response, to take the work to another level and see how the work on campus evolves over time. And that potentially means that there will be transitionings in members, expansion, and also in terms of the structure and what subcommittees or working groups you will establish. So like what we've been saying, you know, when you think about the composition of the team, you want to be able to identify members who are multidisciplinary, who have diverse experience, who have different levels of expertise and perspectives as it relates to DVSAS on campus, and also incorporate representation from key stakeholders across campus and the community, especially those who directly respond to the crimes, those who set campus norms, policies, and practices, and also those members that do represent groups who have been historically marginalized and or excluded from these spaces, or that directly relate to the composition of your campus and their areas of needs. And again, I'll repeat that this is an ongoing process, and that, as you always take a new class of grantees every year, there should be a reflective process of how your campus is evolving or changing, and what are the needs of the community. And for some institutions, it means that over the course of the grant cycle, um, they start being an Hispanic serving institution. And that means a transition in their materials, in spoken languages, in the culture, the experiences that students live. So that's important to remember in the process. And also, when we say think about the broader perspective, you'll see we have a campus partner, an example of bringing a library administrator. And sometimes we just don't take the time to consider, what that has to do with addressing domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking on campus. But take a time to think, like, particularly with library administrators, they work in a library, they have access to research and information that can help inform the work, or that can be used to develop trainings and have references. Most libraries have financial resources to purchase materials that could be used to do wider campus activities, or project a movie, and also just these are groups that respond to students, that attend directly students, that can see some of the things that are happening. All that example to say that everyone is important and plays a critical role into building that collective campus response to address the crimes. And now we are going to use Menti again. This time we'll go over these 3 questions, and I just want to emphasize that you may be able to participate more than once. So let's start with the first question, which is, given your unique campus context, who should participate in your full CCR team? And while you answer that, I see librarians are the best partners. Good. Okay. So yes, you'll invite victim advocates, the university ministry, diversity, equity, and inclusion staff, DEI, athletics, the administration, Title IX, campus safety, Office of Multicultural Student Services and International Education, Greek Life, College Relations and Marketing. Yes, that's a great one. Campus Safety and Residential Life, Title IX again. Students, that's awesome. Yes, students are very important. The Dean of Students, Health Center, Mental Health Therapist, Multicultural Affairs. We need faculty representatives, yes. Housing is important. Counseling, the LGBTQI Resource Center, yes. This is a very good list. Representatives from our professional schools, like the School of Medicine. Also, sometimes there's students of law that play a critical role. Yes, disability services. Yes. Good work. It seems like all of you are right into thinking strategically about who to bring to the team. I also see now provost, an attorney for students. Yes, yes. Legal services are a need for survivors of violence. Research and teaching experts. Yes, because we want to assess your work and to be able to measure the work and be successful in the strategies that you do to teach this information to your wider community. External victim advocates and resources. Okay, this is great. Okay, let's go to the next question. So for this one, we want you to think about and share what barriers may exist to getting full representation on your team. Okay, thank you for participating. And we see time, yes. Lack of interest, buy-in, staff capacity. Yes, overworked staff, there are too many commitments. Time and energy capacity, burnout, that's right. Do remember that you may participate more than once. Yes, burnout, other time commitments and not having to pay CCRT, that don't pay CCRT members, the coordination and not knowing who's in charge of doing what. Students have to come to rightfully, students have come to rightfully expect to be compensated for their work. Yes, that's interesting and it's a good conversation to have with them. Oh, it says other time commitments not paying CCRT members. Good. Lack of support from your department leadership. Shrinking university resources. Yes. Time and other priorities. Yeah, varying beliefs. That's a different type of barrier that takes a little bit more time of effort to address. Yeah, limitations on grant scope for community agencies and the struggle between Zoom versus meeting in person. Yes. Lack of administrative and scheduling help. Yes. Ongoing tension with working with law enforcement. That went through fast. I hope I got that one right. Okay. We will be addressing, some of these barriers as we go along the way during the training and technical institutes and in some of the monthly webinars that you'll have. So you'll have some support, and this will also be addressed very specifically to some of the groups that you mentioned, some of the barriers. So for the next and last question for now, what potential strategies may assist you in overcoming these strategies? And here we just want you to share what has been successful for you or some ideas that you may have so that others can take on and reflect about it and see what they could apply to address some of these challenges. And not sure, that's totally fair. Virtual meetings, not creating over-ambitious goals, yes. Remind CCRT that it is for the students and cultural change, setting regular meetings, clear role for each member, yes. More coordinated outreach to faculty members, taking breaks, having the weight of this grant behind us to give the initiatives priority and importance, celebrating all victories, yes. Offering non-monetary compensation, that's a good idea to explore more. I like that. Provide adequate information to campus community. Yes. Getting the support and push from senior administrators. Yes. All those are great ideas, and I hope that as you go along this journey, you're able to identify more strategies and come back to us and share those with all the team and all your class. So thank you all for participating, and I'll pass this back to Shannon.
Thank you so much. And it's just really nice to see all of those strategies because you're already kind of participating in this peer support that we're talking about. So you all already have a lot of strategies and a lot of ideas on how to build this on your campus. So that's really lovely to see and witness. So let's bring it back to where to start. And I recognize, from the beginning that half of you have CCRTs already in place. So you already have a structure, you already have a team, and you might already have an idea of how you want to move forward. And for some of you who haven't yet assembled this team, we wanted to offer some concrete steps for what to do next. And the first question that a lot of people ask is simply when you should hold the first meeting. And so we really want you to assemble some form of your team. It might not be the full team, it might be a smaller version, but really to bring people together before the first Training and Technical Assistance Institute, which should happen. You will get a date for that. I can't give you a date right now. Late February, early March, right? So we really want you to try to bring folks together before then. And that's really important, I think, to say out loud, because a lot of campuses who have not yet hired the project director want to wait until they make that hire to have the first meeting. And we really want to encourage you not to wait, to have the meeting prior to bringing on the project director. That really helps begin to build that community engagement and team leadership before the project director needs to come in and do it. So I think that, sometimes when project directors, when there's a delay in hiring project directors, they come in late and feel like they're trying to catch up and they missed a lot. But from my perspective as a technical assistance provider, the campuses that really move forward before hiring the project director end up having a more robust and engaged team because they didn't have that project director to lean on in the beginning. And so then they're able to select and onboard and support the project director once they do come into the role. And to be clear, for those of you who are already hired, it works both ways. And so, but you really want to engage your team as early as possible in this process. So who should attend? It varies. Obviously, if you already have a team in place, that team will continue to meet. If you're a very large campus, then your core team might be, 12 to 16 members. If you're a very small campus, your first core team might be 5 or 6 members. So this is really going to vary based on your campus size and structure and resources and all of the other kinds of barriers that you've already identified previously. And the third thing to think about is, what is your goal in this meeting? And of course, information sharing is one of those goals or a part of that goal. You want to share with the team information that you gathered at the new grantee orientation, information about the structure of the program, but a goal always in CCRT meetings are building those relationships. Really making sure that every single meeting you have some time and opportunity for team members to just connect and to learn more about one another and to build trust. Because over time, you're going to start talking about some heavy topics, and you really need to create that container that's built on trust and mutual respect and really create a space where people feel comfortable speaking honestly about their perspective and about their experiences. So, we added this slide because it's a question that we get a lot. What should our first agenda look like? What should we really be talking about? So we wanted to offer you some suggestions of what has worked for other campuses in the past. Of course, you're going to develop your own agenda based on where your campus CCRT is. But some ideas are simply an overview of the OVW campus program and the technical assistance roadmap, some goals for your particular project, the purpose and the role of a CCR team, because we can't assume that our partners are going to know what that is or looks like. And that really includes expectations for CCR team members to be active participants, and to provide input and direction into the project, and also to have some input on the frequency of meetings and times. And I see your question in the chat, Jessica, and I'll get to it in just a moment. As well as, of course, discussion on which one of your team members will attend the Technical Assistance Institutes. And I also just want to make a comment here on how to do it. We will get into the weeds of team development and facilitation in our TTIs next year, but just some basic strategies to help you get started are really to ask different team members to lead different agenda items. And I know that sounds simple, but you really want to start from the very beginning in modeling that collective leadership approach. And asking team members to lead agenda items helps them take ownership over the project. Use materials that you've received here, so you don't need to recreate the wheel. And then, of course, move at the pace of humanity. You know, we don't want to overwhelm you, and you don't want to overwhelm your teams. It's a lot to take in. So, know that you don't have to say everything that needs to be said in the first meeting. You can think through that. One of the things that we do as TA providers is to help people develop agendas for their teams. So we're happy to help you do that. Your most important role here is to communicate with your team and engage your teams in the process. That is what the real goal of that first meeting is. And, a final point I want to make on that is, the project supervisor, if you have not yet hired your project director, must have some type of transition or communication plan in place to properly onboard the project director in terms of what has happened so far, and where you are in the process when you bring on that project director. And Maria Cristina is going to speak next about onboarding that project director. But I guess I will, or we'll save that last question until the end. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. This is Maria Cristina. So in your welcome packets, OVW provided you with a helpful checklist about successfully onboarding the new project director. And we would just like to share some reflections from a coordinated community response standpoint on that role of the project director. And one of the most critical resources that the grant provides us is precisely that ability to hire someone full-time to manage and support the facilitation of this work. Therefore, the language that we use to describe the project director is really backbone support, or that support to someone that orchestrates, the work group. And this type of the institutional support, again, is one of the gifts that you get through this award. So when a new project director is hired, two things can happen. They could be given like all the project related grant application documents and left on their own to figure it out. Or that new project director could be held back from developing critical relationships. And we want you all to be mindful and find what is the right balance of empowerment that person while supporting them in the process of building those relationships and establishing that groundwork that will allow the group to achieve sustainability. So they will need support. The project director needs support. They are new to the campus and the institution potentially, so they will need to have that companionship to open doors and facilitate that relationship building between departments, community partners, and even understanding what is the campus culture. And then, depending on who's the project supervisor and who's the project director, there needs to be clarity about the roles that each of those persons takes. So the idea is to empower the project director for success, but also exploring, what are the areas of need of each one, what are the strengths that each of both of you bring to the team, and then what are the resources that are needed to complete a smooth onboarding process and also to prepare to work together towards implementation. And in all of this process, it is critical that there's clear and transparent communication from both parts, because both are accountable in this process. And that's why we invite you to think about, we usually meet with the project directors as part of the technical assistance point of contact calls, but also project supervisors should join these calls every once in a while to show their commitment, their support, to be able to oversee the work and what's going on, to support relationships with the providers. So this is a process, onboarding someone may take a year, it just depends on time, but it is a process. So here in this next slide, we just want to share or remind you that there are resources available and that the pace of this grant is not to just start doing things and implementing and showing, completion or results. We want to be able for you to be able to communicate to the leadership team and your coordinated community response that you can slow down, and we want this to be very intentional and thinking carefully about what will happen and building relationships and just preparing for implementation in a way that shows that collective effort. And I know we're close to time, so I am going to pause so we can take any questions you may have before we wrap up the session. And here's our contact information. I think, Shannon, that you were going to answer a question in the chat. I can't really see the chat while sharing my screen. So.
Sure, thank you. This is Shannon speaking. The question in the chat is from Jessica and asks, what do you suggest for frequency and duration of CCRT meetings? That question differs depending on the structure of your CCRT, and it can vary pretty dramatically between campuses based on their size. So small campuses will often start with a monthly meeting schedule for the CCRT, but very large campuses can end up with very large CCRTs, and those full CCRTs might meet quarterly, but working groups meet more often. So there's not necessarily one answer to that because there's lots of different structures that can work. I would say that if you're just developing a CCRT and you're bringing folks together for the first time, that meeting at least monthly makes sense to me. And sometimes there's even a core team that meets more often while you're just assembling the team and determining who should be on the team. So I hate to give you that sort of non-answer. Some campuses, when they're meeting virtually, limit meetings to 1 hour. Others who are really trying to have enough time to really do working meetings will have 90-minute meetings. And so I've seen both of those types of meetings work as well in terms of duration. And again, if you want to talk through your specific campus context, just reach out to us. This is the type of technical assistance that we do. And then Nora is asking, do you recommend having members of CCRT steering committee also serving on working groups or having other campus members in the working groups? That is a great question. One common structure that we see is that if you have, now, so not everyone is required, I should say, to have a steering committee structure. I know that Nora works on a very large campus, and so thus has a very large CCRT with a steering committee structure. And so one of the things that we've seen be very successful with those structures is having steering committee members chair the working groups. And what that does is create a consistent communication channel between the working groups to the steering committee and then back out to the full CCRT. If what I'm saying doesn't make sense to you, know that we are going to address CCRT structure in the March TTI. So I know we are at time, so thank you so much for your participation and your questions. You have our contact information. That campus TA email that Maria Cristina put in the chat goes to both of us. And we would love to hear from you. And if we don't, we hope you have a wonderful holiday. And we will see you in 2022. Actually, we'll see you tomorrow for day 3 of the orientation.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all the TA providers. Thank you, Maria Cristina and Shannon. Thanks to all of you for sitting with us all day. We're at the end of day 2. You have one more day of orientation. So hopefully you are learning a lot. We start again at 11 tomorrow Eastern time. And tomorrow we'll actually have our principal deputy director come on and welcome you, as well as hopefully the campus program's direct boss, Darlene Johnson. Hopefully she will grace us with her presence and introduce our principal deputy. So have a great evening, everybody. Get some rest, and we'll see you at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Bye-bye, everybody.
I have a really quick question.
Sure. We'll stay on if you will. No one else has to stay on.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The checklist is the one for this NGO session on the TA website. I saw the one for November, but I did not see one for this one.
It might be in the Clery Dropbox, but we are trying to cross-check and make sure that all of the materials are uploaded. So it should be uploaded soon. So if it's not there today, give us a little bit of time. We're trying to make sure all of the documents are uploaded. We went to check it yesterday, so it should be there. I can't give you a timeline because we're working with another entity, but we're trying to make sure it's there.
Okay, no problem. And then will only one representative from the institution complete it, or each individual from the institution would apply? Who's on the NGO?
You can have one member, but you would have to name the other members who also participated. So that's perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you so much. Y'all have a great evening.
You too.
You too.
You guys are always so great, Shannon and Margustina. I'm so jealous because we don't have the ability to do Menti.
Someday.
Someday you can get Menti.
One day we'll come into the new century.